Welcome, everybody. This is the launch party for Christy Meyer's Rembrandt Station, and we have some wonderful space opera and romance authors here this afternoon, and we're looking forward to spending some time together chatting and getting to know you through chat. If you were listening, the best place to make comments is through YouTube, watching the live chat. If you go in through Facebook, there's going to be enough of a lag for us to copy things, but we're hoping that you can come by and spend some time with us. Go ahead and introduce our authors here. First, I'm Jeff, the eponymous husband, and my wife, Christy Myers, is the person that's brought us all together today with the latest of her Talari space novels. Christy, would you care to introduce yourself?
You didn't tell me I had to introduce myself.
Then I'll introduce you. Christy Myers writes space opera, has been for about 10 years, including the Talari series, which is set on a world of near-human empaths, about 24 light years from Earth. Rembrandt Station is her 5th novel, and a lot of what she does explores the culture, the differences that empathy and the other changes made to the Talari by their mysterious benefactors have on their culture and their interactions with Earth. Generally, there are romance plots, not erotica, and we'll probably get some readings from her a little bit later on. So next on my screen, Sharon Lee and Steve Miller. Say a little bit about yourselves, friends.
A little bit about ourselves. We are the authors of the Liaden Universe. We have been doing this for a long time. The first Liaden Universe novel came out in 1988. And we made the executive decision before we wrote even the first one that there would be romance in our universe.
And that was
startling.
at the time it was startling. At the time it was unusual. But we can get into that a little further later. You have to understand that when I started reading science fiction about 1956, and
that's like the last century.
Indeed, and Sharon not too much longer later than that, and so we grew up on the collections and anthologies that were being anthologized from stories that were published in 1944, 1950. And so, yeah, we started out in an entirely different era than many of the people who are writing these days.
Okay. And definitely interested in hearing more about that later. Rebecca Thorne.
Yeah, hi. I write as R.K. Thorne. I write romantic space opera and romantic epic fantasy, little fantasy romance, and I have about 10 books. I'm also on the SIFWA Science Fiction Fantasy Writers of America Romantic Steering Committee, so trying to make some space for more romantic writers inside our professional organization. And yeah, I think that's about me. I have a cat and a dog.
And a dog.
And I also read the classics when I was first getting started, even though I'm probably the youngest one here. Heinlein was my gateway drug.
Okay, and we're not doing age comparisons here.
Sorry.
No, not at all. Carol Van Natta.
Hi, I write space opera, romance, and science fiction from time to time, and some paranormal romance as well. And my first book came out in 2014, I think. Of my this book right here, as a matter of fact. Look, I have props. I can't hold them worth beans because I reverse on the camera, but. There it is. And like Steve and Sharon, I write, I purposefully include romance because the story arc, the big damn story arc that's going on in my series is rebellion and revolution. And that's not really fun for those of us who are old enough to have actually lived through some of those times it's really not a really fun time. So I purposefully included romance because I wanted readers to want to read the next book and not go, now I'll go slit my wrists then.
Well, that's definitely a worthy goal.
Well, yes, I like readers to come back for more.
Yep.
Always leave them wanting more. Yes.
Yeah.
So, but before we go on, two things I want to say in terms of housekeeping. One of them is that I just in the chat on YouTube put a giveaway rafflecopter link for a free copy, a signed paperback copy of Rembrandt Station, Christie's newest novel. And the way this is going to work is, please, over the next 30 minutes, go ahead and sign up for that. Leave your name. We will announce the name of the winner and then have you get a hold of us to get your signed copy. We're going to be doing a couple of giveaways in the course of the lunch party, and we'll see how that goes. So that the next thing is, while we're at the start, everybody's here. I would like to hear from each of you what you're writing next in the way of science fiction romance. Just briefly, can talk more later.
Who starts?
Oh, Christy, how about you?
Oh, okay. Well, I've been actually writing two things. One of them is a sequel novelette to Rembrandt Station to tie up the loose end that I introduced in the epilogue. And I will be reading a little bit from that later on. Okay. And the other thing that I am writing is a full-length novel about a new character in the Talari space universe who's going to end up on Tolar under entirely different circumstances than any of the others have so far. And that's lots of fun.
Okay. Rebecca.
My primary work right now is one of my epic fantasies, but I just finished the 5th book in this series, so I'm a little like sci-fi burnout at the moment, but I have some like side stories, like, side characters that were off clearly having romantic tension. So I'm trying to finish up some of those stories before I totally forget this entire series. But those are more like kind of hopefully bonus short stories that I'll be able to give away to readers and stuff. But yeah, we'll see, because sometimes you get stuck in the one world and then it draws you away. So we'll see what happens.
Absolutely. Carol.
So I'm currently working on 2.5 projects. I'm going to call the half project, I edit the annual Pets in Space science fiction romance anthology, and it's a charity anthology, and that's the current one is Pets in Space 7 that came out in October, but it's a limited edition and it goes away in January. And then what I'm doing right now is recruiting authors for the next book. So that's my half book that I have, and then I'm writing the novella that goes in that Pets in Space 8 anthology, and working on the long-awaited book 5 or novel 5 in the Big Dem story arc of my Galactic Concordance series.
Great. And Sharon and Steve. Steve and Sharon.
Sharon and Steve, Steve and Sharon. I am presently working on a nameless novel that directly succeeds Trader's Leap. I should have been working on it. Was a novel I should have been working on last year when I got attacked by salvage right. So we did that one first.
And I am still working on a Jethry story for those of you who've read any of our stuff, and it's in the entire trade lanes, but it's in the earlier traders rather than the later traders. This is set a couple hundred years before Shawn and the main line, and I will admit that this has been part of the difficulty, is that the main line has been changing, so I have now to fit.
You have to square up history.
I have to make the history correct in in what Jethry's doing, or else people are going to say, "Oh no, look what they missed."
That's the worst.
Yes, we do. But those will be novels 26 and 27.
Mhm.
And what's Sharon will be turning in hers in June or July,
June, yes.
and I'll be turning mine in August or September. So there should be a couple of books coming out in 2024.
Sounds great. So Sharon, just out of curiosity and not strictly science fiction related, do you have any other plans for other genre books? Because I know that you've been writing variety of other things. Or
No.
are those giving way to Liaden?
Sadly, the Liaden books sell, and this ties into Carol's. We want them to buy the next one. The Carousel books, I like them. they did not nearly as well as the Liaden books did.
Mm-hmm. They're a lot of fun, and I have to say, as a reader, I love the Jethry stories. Having grown up on the Heinlein juveniles, and then seeing what somebody else does with the whole process of someone finding their place in the world is just really wonderful. In all of the different ways you've done that.
Well, thank you. We had some help getting us to that stage. Actually, is that we had we wrote a book for what was supposed to be a series of novels, and
Work for hire.
A work for hire. And for that, what I had done was I spent about a month alternating between reading Andre Norton and Robert Heinlein book. So I'd read a Norton book one day and a Heinlein book the next, and then a Norton book and then a Heinlein book. Did that for a month, and so that helps me get into the younger adult mode rather than. And having had that experience, Jethry has fallen to me at this point to be lead one.
No more teenagers.
No more teenagers.
Sharon came to me and she said that, and then she's ended up dealing with Patty, who is
old enough.
Is old enough. Okay.
No more halflings?
No more halflings. Well,
they do grow up eventually.
Eventually, if they're not too awful as halflings, they grow up.
Okay, so to kick things off, I guess I'd have a question for all of you, and we'll start in a different order this time. What attracted you? Well, let me preface this by saying, Christy and I do science fiction conventions, as several of the authors here do. And one of the things that often people get put on a panel to answer the question of is, what is space opera anyway? There is absolutely no way that I intend to really bring that up here. That's either a 30-second question or weekend long with alcoholic beverages. But I'd like to ask each of you, what attracted you in particular to writing space opera or space adventure? Carol.
So I have to say that I was corrupted very early, like Sharon and Steve, actually, in science fiction, because I was bothering my parents one summer saying, I want something to read. And they said, here are ace doubles, have at it, kid. And they, because my stepfather at the time had a really nice collection of them that he'd moved around and stuff like that. And they thought that this was going to be, keep me like occupied for years. It kept me occupied for about 2 months. And then they unleashed the genie, as it were, because I was not like, I want something to read. I was like, I want science fiction to read. So it started me. I was just like, sent down that path. So when I was having all these ideas for stories and stuff like this, romance kept creeping into it. But at the time, as Sharon and Steve can attest, romance just wasn't the thing that you put in science fiction, if you wanted to call it science fiction, because otherwise, you were getting icky romance in their precious science fiction and stuff. So and then I went to writers convention probably, oh gosh, maybe about 2010, 2011. And they had a couple of traditional publisher editors and agents on the panel, and somebody else, thank God it wasn't me, stood up and said, "Hi, I'm writing science fiction romance. What, do you like to see that?" And they were all, the professional people were all so sneering about that. I was like, wow, okay, you've just proved to me why I want to be in the self-publishing world.
Seriously.
Because clearly that, and then, so I write what I like, and then I started calling it space opera romance pretty quickly, because the science fiction romance people were too much about the alien kidnap, non-com, dubious consent, stuff
May
like
I see
that.
a show of
That's
hands?
not what I write.
There's very
So-
specific tropes, yeah.
Yeah. So
And
there. That's why I write space opera romance with adventure and mysteries and spaceships and.
Christy and I sometimes struggle with finding the right terminology for exactly that reason.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's hard.
Yeah.
Rebecca, what about you?
So I said that Highland was my gateway drug, but actually I realized I had this sitting right here. It was actually Anne McCaffrey who permanently confused genres in my head forever. So even though this has dragons on it, it's really science fiction. So, and there was romantic elements in some books and not in other books. I always, as a reader, wanted romance in my stories. And I didn't really get that though. Like I was always just like, why does this one not seem interesting and this other one does? It wasn't until I was a writer that I actually figured out I was looking for romantic books all the time. But yeah, so I think my when I was actually pretty young when a friend's dad loaned me some of these Anne McCaffrey books and just kind of got me hooked. And then after that, I kind of was like, well, I don't think I just want to read this. I think I want to write it. And if I want to write it, I want to have a really, broad ranging kind of like, understanding of the genre. So I started trying to kind of give myself a systematic reading of stuff, which is how I sort of got into starting with the classics and that sort of thing. I always was more interested in the sci-fi classics than the fantasy, which is funny because I've got more fantasy books written. But I just think space opera has a lot of the fun things that fantasy also has in terms of like adventure and, kind of like bombastic explosions. And, I think you can, it's kind of, to me, they're kind of similar, like epic fantasy and science fiction. It's just like one has the laser guns and the other one has the arrows, kind of thing. So, but I like being able to make kind of more modern technological references. So no matter how much my fantasy makes a lot more money, but I have to go back and talk about computers at some point. So
What about you, Sharon?
What about me?
What about you? What got you into science fiction?
What got me into science fiction? Going way back, we come from a place where you couldn't just read science fiction and that was your whole life. You had to read in other genres, or else if you were a reader, you didn't have anything to read. So I started reading mysteries and romances. That's what I read as a young person. And I liked romances, but there was something missing. And I stumbled across a Heinlein book and I hated it. It was being in the library. And I wandered around some more and read some more romances, but it's still, something missing. And then I hit, I don't even remember, it might have been another Heinlein book, and this one was great. And I was like, this is what was missing, the adventure part. So that's, I kind of wanted the same thing that Rebecca was talking about, the hybrid. I wanted the romance and the adventure in the same place, please. So that's what attracts me. Yes.
Definitely. And Christy?
Hi, Tom. This is my cover artist, Tom Peters, who drew the incredibly beautiful cover for Rembrandt Station and The Fall and Farron's War as well. Okay, to answer the question, I guess my gateway drug was actually the beginning of it all was Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. That was the first thing I read before I read any science fiction. And then I found fantasy, and then I found Andre Norton. And I devoured Andre Norton, and I devoured Heinlein, and then I went into Clarke and Asimov, and went on from there. There's another name in there I'm missing. I'm bad with names. And in the middle of all of that, at the same time, I was also reading every book in my mother's Harlequin romance closet. So when I started writing, it was coming out as science fiction, and my characters kept falling in love with each other.
Yes.
Welcome, Tom.
We can't hear you, Tom.
Tom.
So yeah, I mean that
Jeff, do you have any of the images from Tom's covers?
I will be bringing them up shortly.
Stephanie, I see you.
Mm-hmm.
Your dragon comment.
So
Okay, I found the unmute button.
Hi.
So
Hi,
since
Tom.
you're here, Tom, I guess I'll ask you what pulled you into science fiction adventure?
Oh God, being born, I think. I started actually the very first piece of science fiction, or very first piece of fiction of any sort I ever read was Tom Corbett's Space Cadet when I was like 8 years old. And from then on, I was lost.
Okay. So we've kind of settled on the space adventure, and I guess the flip side of that is, and everybody's mentioned romance. I'm really intrigued by what Sharon was saying about they decided in the beginning there would be romance, which I, as a couple of other people mentioned, has sometimes been tricky in terms of genre, figuring out what the limits are. But I guess the thing I'd like to ask, and maybe it'll come up later on. What is for you the essence of a romantic story? What makes it that sort of story? And maybe, who does it, just one or two names, who do you think does it particularly well, whether, science fiction or anything else? Steve.
Well, that's really difficult because I tend to read widely, and I always have. When Sharon and I got together, she seemed quite surprised that I had this whole section of books from somebody she had never heard of. And I said, here, read one of these. And it was a lady that I had met through the science fiction fans down in DC, because I had got drafted into a Georgette Heyer tea. And I said, what's this about? And somebody handed me a book. And about a third of the way through the tea, I was about a third of the way through the book. I'm wondering, where's more? And so that when Sharon and I met, she knew all about Lord Peter Wimsey.
I swapped him, Peter for Heyer.
And I knew about Georgette Heyer, and we continued to sort of swap. Heyer, of course, being the progenitor of actual romance for many people, because she did the
That's an interesting thing to say, because her romance is not, it's almost pure love. We don't do, oh yes, it's a sex scene and go on in the Heyer books. It's about the meeting, it's the pure romance ideal, the meeting of two people and the working out of how we are going to stay together.
Yes. Ultimately, romance is about partnership, and that's what it came down to for us when we were finding each other, and also in the books. And if you look at Lord Peter Wimsey, if you're not familiar with one of the things there is his relationship with Harriet Vane is as unexpected as it might be, still depends on not only the philosophical, I see this person, I love them, therefore I want to be with them approach, which is sort of about
the thing he says to his mother, "Mama, I found her, but she's been so terribly hurt."
Yeah, so it's a different but it's becoming a partner is a whole lot of what it is that we do with our characters. And we both had chosen some things to read for today, and one of the parts that I chose was dealing with the partnership situations. If we want to go into, if there's an opportunity for that reading later, but to me, romance isn't just sex. Understand that at one point, one of my jobs was that at a video store was that I was in charge of buying the porn for the place. And it was required that I see every movie that I brought in and put on the shelf. And I could see that some of them were more romantic than others. And that sort of carried through. There's romance, there's sex, there's sometimes that they come together, but having had that job didn't put me off of sex or of romance, but it gives me maybe a clearer understanding than some has.
Okay, that makes sense.
Just because
Carol, you look like you wanted to say something.
Oh, well, I have this discussion a lot because so what I think of as romance is like two people coming together, finding a balance, because imbalanced relationships kind of bother me, and those kinds of things as well. But I mostly care what the readers think as what is a romance. So I'm kind of careful to make sure that I follow those expectations when I write when I identify something as a romance, meaning that it is the story of these people coming together. There is no cheating. There is a happily ever after, or at least a happy for now kind of relationship, and that it is not just, hi, I think I love you, moving on.
Rebecca?
I like what Steve was saying about partnership. That definitely resonates with me. I think I wrote my first book on Goodreads. There was a list I got put on that was kick-ass battle couples, and I was like, that was amazing. Like, can every book get put on that list? Like, this kind of partnership in terms of like, healthy people that both have like a lot going on, but they can like work together to do something bigger than they could accomplish alone. I think that's really cool stuff. I mean, I think also the reader kind of requirements of like an optimistic ending, a happy ending, like that's stuff that I want in books anyway. So it's pretty easy for me to like meet that requirement. I don't really need a book to be a letdown, but yeah, I think that's pretty interestingly important to most things to call them a romance. And I end up doing that. I think there are romantic stories that can go across more than one book and not necessarily have that, but it's definitely walking a line that's harder to meet with the readers.
Well, if you identify that as a slow burn, though,
yes,
if you know that across the series that eventually they're going to end together,
right? And like sometimes that's just like
you, and your readers trust you to finish the series.
The series, yeah. I know there was one book
readers have no trouble with that.
Yes,
it's the ones where they, oh look, she died.
Yeah. Yes, tragic. Now she's dead. That's the end. Like in one of Lindsay's Brokers. Yeah. In one of Lindsay Broker's series, I think there were like 3 books before they held hands. And I was just like dying for that, like that moment. I was like, yes. it's like 8 books until they get to like really do anything. Yeah, it's just the slowest burn, but they're so good.
Christy, I think you're familiar with that, but not necessarily 8 books, but what, 8 years?
Well, yeah, in my first book, it's when did they get together? It's near the end of the book, but it's 8 years of story time.
It's a very slow burn, but readers seem to like it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was mostly because, I mean, I guess I kind of favor these characters that don't see what's going on. Birdie kind of does that. He's in love, but he doesn't think the other person is even slightly interested in him. So he just keeps on keeping on. And the case with the Moran, Marianne is denying to herself that she's attracted to the Sorrel and not seeing his attraction at all. And besides, he's her boss, and she's a school teacher. You don't have an affair with the principal.
No.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Tom, since you were able to join us, romance from your point of view, what makes a story a romance?
Oh, goodness. I think it is very much, hate to steal his thunder, but what Steve said, it's a partnership, and a romantic partnership is just a partnership with more fun.
In all sorts of ways.
Yeah.
Benefits.
Yeah.
Sharon, anything to add?
I'm good. What Steve said.
We can mention probably in passing that one of the things that we do in the evening, and I've had people tell us it's romantic. It started back in the days where we'd sit down at dinner, light a candle afterwards, and sit and read to each other. Well, we gave over lighting a candle with our glass of wine because that actually proves to be dangerous, all that smoke and stuff. But we still sit around a lot of times and read. And one of the continuing series, or a number of continuing series that we've read, are from Nalini Singh. Are anybody familiar with Nalini's work?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
No, go.
And when I first came across and was presented with this, I said, okay, shapeshifters, huh? Or, we have all kinds of odd characters, but I already write science fiction and fantasy. I was willing to go with some of that disbelief. And I found out that Nalini has a sure hand at it. She does well at it. And so we continue to read these things to each other. Understand that we were discovered by romance. We did not, in effect, rather than being the other way around. Some people apparently have moved into writing romance, knowing all the ins and outs and what is it? HEA, happily ever after, and all that.
Yeah.
We had no clue.
Oh no, I knew that part.
Well, Sharon may have known it, but I didn't know that these things were all. And in fact, it wasn't until somebody sent me a list of what had to happen by page 7. I am serious. Had to happen by page 14. Had to be, and it turns out that some of the Harlequins were actually done by that formula.
Yeah,
Thankfully, we didn't know that.
That would be another reason what attracts us to science fiction and to space opera, that we don't have to have things that happen by page 7 and things that happen to have to happen by page 14. I am holding here, by the way, our business card. This is our business card. And on the back of our business card, which we've been using for years and years and years, it says, "The Liaden Universe, where honor, wit, and true love are potent weapons against deceit and treachery." That's our tagline. That's what we do.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
But we were discovered by the romance
Oh yeah, that was
readers.
We had 2 books out very close together from Del Rey. We had Agent of Change out first, which was basically space opera. It was drop them on the ground and they run. And the other one we had was Conflict of Honors, which came out just a few months after that, which was a nod to Peter Wimsey and Harriet Vane. And they were both reviewed. The space opera Agent Change was reviewed, and Locus, who went, oh, ho hum, a space opera. Yes, Lee and Miller have done a space opera. They've done a competent job. And the Conflict of Honors was reviewed in Romantic Times. And they went, I have never seen anything like this. More. We want more of this.
And they were able to get through the science fiction, which had been a stumbling block to many of the readers. We were more about story than we were about compression ratios, and we were willing to smooth out some of that kind of thing that pushed those writers away. But our story was, the science was integral to the story, the romance was integral to the story, and we started finding ourselves listed in the romance pages quite early.
Okay. We'll talk to it.
Well, with that, Sharon and Steve, this is your part of the show. So you have the main stage.
Okay, hold on. Let me do this before we forget.
Sharon, you said you had an audiobook or two to give away.
I do. We have 2 copies of the audio edition of Fair Trade to give away, and that comes in the form of a coupon code from Audible.
All right, I will put the raffle for that up in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
I will bring this up and see if we can present it to the camera.
There we go.
Just about wants to work. This is how we met. This is how we met Christy. We won the 2002 Prism Award for Futuristics, and
given by a romance club.
And it's the kind of thing we were not anticipating being pointed to for romance when we started writing together. We were we really didn't want to be pointed at either all that much, but so we won this award, and then Christy went on to
yes, it was, no, it is no longer given, which is kind of a shame.
Okay, but what we have here, and I think I have enough light to do this.
Glasses and everything.
I have my glasses and I have the book, and I even have it bookmarked. This speaks to the romance side of things, and except I read it to Sharon earlier, and I went
and you bookmarked it in the wrong place. There you go.
Okay, so this is from Local Custom, and this was our.
Don't even talk to me.
Which number of
Not
books?
even talk to me.
Okay.
The 4th, maybe.
This may have been the 4th of our novels, and it appeared initially not as a standalone.
No, it appeared as an original omnibus, because our publisher at that point was convinced that no one would buy these side books. So he just, since he bought them, he just slapped them together in one book, and that was a mistake as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, he'd come to us and said, yeah, I've read these 3 books of yours, and we said there's more, and we explained that we had 7 altogether, and he said, I'll take them.
Sight unseen.
Sight unseen. So
for him.
So this was chapter 6 in Local Custom, and we'll start with to be at the beginning here. Any slight, no matter how small, requires balancing, lest the value of one's Melanti be lessened. Balance is an important and intricate part of liaison culture, with the severity of rebuttal figured individually by each debt partner in accordance with his or her own Melanti. For instance, one liaison might balance an insult by demanding you surrender your dessert to him at dinner whereas another individual might calculate balance of that same insult to require a death. Balance death is admittedly rare, but it is best always to speak softly, bow low, and never give a Liaden cause to think he has been slighted. And that's from A Terran's Guide to Liad. It was a crisp, bright day of the kind that doubtlessly delighted the resident population. Ertom shivered violently as he hit Quad S and belatedly dragged on his jacket, sealing the front, jerking the collar tight. Jamming his hands into the fur-lined pockets, he strode off, heedless both of his direction and the stares of those he passed, and only paused in his headlong flight when he found water barring his path. He stopped and blinked over the glittering expanse before him, trying to steady his disordered thoughts. The child's name was Josgalin. He shivered again, though he had walked far enough and hard enough to exercise to warm him. His Melanti was imperiled, though that hardly concerned him so much that he'd already worked toward its ruination, and the Melanti of Clan Corval as well. A Josgalin born and the clan unaware of it. Corval was high house and known to be eccentric. Society wags spoke of the dragon's directive and Corval's madness, but even so strong and varied a Melanti could scarcely hope to come away from such a debacle untainted. Ertom closed his eyes again against the lake's liquid luster. Why? Why had she done this thing? What had he done that demanded such an answer from him? And there. So stringent a balancing argued an insult of such magnitude that he must have been aware of his transgression. But he recalled nothing. Abruptly then he laughed. Whatever the cause, only see the beauty of the balance. A Josgalin, born and raised as Terran, growing to adulthood, building what Melanti he might, clan and line alike, all in ignorance. If Ertom Josgalin had been a stronger man, one who knew enough of his duty to embrace forgetfulness without once more seeking out the cause of his heart illness, it was in truth an artwork of balance. But what coin of his had purchased it? If Anne had felt herself slighted, if he had belittled her or failed some way of giving her her full honor. Hold, he thought to himself, staring sightlessly across the lake. Anne is Terran. A revelation began to dawn. There were some who argued that Terrans possessed neither Melanti nor honor. It was a view largely popular with those who had never been beyond Liad or Liad's outer worlds. Traders and scouts tended to espouse a less popular philosophy based on actual observation. He himself had traded with persons not Liaden. As with Liadens, there were those who were honorable and those who were not. Local custom often dictated a system strange to Liaden thought, though, and once grasped, it was seen to be honor and consistent with what one knew to be right conduct. Dov, his brother, went further, arguing that Melanti existed independent of a person's consciousness and might be deduced from careful observation. It was then the burden of a person of conscious Melanti to give all proper respect to the unawakened consciousness and guard its sleeping potential. Ertom thought his brother's views extreme. Well, until he had met Anne Davis. He knew Anne to be a person of honor. He had observed her Melanti firsthand and at length, and he would place it, in its very different strengths, equal to his own. She was not one to start a debt war from spite, nor to take extreme balance as bolster for an unsteady sense of self. Is it possible, he asked himself slowly, that Anne named the boy to honor me? The lake dazzled his eyes as the paving stones seemed to move under his feet. He grappled with the notion, trying to accommodate the alien shape, and he grit his teeth against the desire to cry out that no one might reasonably think such a thing. but facts. Anne was an honorable person. There had been nothing requiring balance between them. The child's name was Joost Gallen. Therefore, pardon me, therefore Anne had meant honor, or at least no harm, by her actions of naming the child Joost Gallen. He drew a deep breath of chill air, almost giddy with relief. That there was no balancing here, that he must answer, that he need not bring harm to her, whom he only wished to cherish and protect. There remained only to decide what must be properly done about the child. You'll note, he says, that this is chapter 6, that bit. The rest of the book,
Here we set up the book. So.
yeah, the rest of the book is about what is to be done with the child.
Jeff, do we have time for another reading, or are we
Absolutely. You have till the top of the hour.
to the top of the hour? Well, okay. This is from the follow-on book, Scout's Progress, Local Customs, Scout's Progress. And in the setup for this book, there has been a new casino opened in Chancelta, which is the minor city on the homeworld of Liad. Salsintra is the big city. And all of the high rollers have come to the opening of this new casino, and also some people who just kind of wandered in by accident. She was utterly out of place in the jewel glitter, silk whisper crowd of players. Her quilted shirt was large and shapeless, fastened tight around her fragile throat. Her only adornment was an antique silver puzzle ring. Her hair, dark blonde or light brown, draggled too close round her face, and her eyes, thought Yovadi, who saw her first, were gray, or possibly a foggy green. She stood quiet as a mouse at the side of the table, flanked by 2 halflings in scout leather, foggy eyes intent in the thin, hair-shrouded face. At first, she thought it was Chelmara she was after, so raptly did she watch the play, and why not? He was a well-looking man and of good line, though that would matter less to her than the contra piled before him. The Chelmara would never consider something so dowdy, Yovadi knew, but what harm to let the mouse dream? And then he saw it was the cards that she was watching, and frowned to himself. Fastidious as he was in bedmates, Chelmara would play against any who sat at table. But surely, thought Yovadi, a ragged girl was scarcely a contra for her quarter share if he was any judge. You find the game amusing? Chelmara's query hovered on the edge of superior to inferior, proper enough for a high-house lordling out of Salsintra when addressing a mouse of unexalted birth. It would have been more gentle to bespeak her otherwise, he being a guest in her city, but the Chelmara was not the gentleman. He gathered in his latest winnings and stacked the coins before him in careful towers of 12, hardly sparing a glance at the mouse's thin face. I find the game interesting, she returned in an unexpectedly strong voice and in the mode of adult to adult. And I cannot for the life of me, sir, understand why you continue to win. Chelmara raised his eyebrows in elegant amusement. I continue to win because my line of play is superior. Not so, she returned with such surety that Yovadi openly stared. It is a badly flawed line, sir, indeed a solid loser over time. Chelmara leaned back in his chair and gazed blandly up into her face. How very interesting, he purred, and moved a languid hand showing table of cards and contra. We have before us the means to test your theory. She hesitated not at all, but came forward and sat in the chair Segander had just vacated. Her guardian scouts came forward as well and stood one behind each shoulder. Certainly, sir, she said. Certainly, Chelmara repeated, but it's a valiant mouse to sit with the cats. He bowed, seated as he was, the gesture full with mockery. What shall you stake, Lady Mouse? My quarter share, she stated, and produced it, 4 contra, which was better than Yvonne had thought, but nothing near Chelmara's more usual state. For contra it is, he agreed, plucking a matching amount from his treasury. Oh, yes, very handsome, cried Sigander, who was a bitter loser. The poor lady stakes her entire quarter share, and you match it with 4 from your hoard. Where's the honor in that? Stake something that will pain you as much should you lose it, and make the play worth her while. Chelmara raised his eyebrows. I cannot imagine what could possibly mean as much to me as 4 contra does to this lady. Sigander grinned tightly. Why not your ship, then? My ship? Chelmara turned wondering eyes upon him as a crowd began to gather, drawn by the ruckle. It would be done thus, the male scout said unexpectedly, in Salsintra. He grinned, fresh-faced, and bowed to Chelmara's rank. My lord need have no concern of pursuing a Melanti stake here. I am assured that Quinpelt aspires to be the equal of any casino in Salsintra. He raised his voice. The stakes book, if you please. There was a shifting of the crowd as the floormaster came panting up with the book and pens. A Melanti stake, someone of the crowding spectators whispered loudly. Value for value absolute. Ship against quarter share. Ship against quarter share. The information ran the casino. Plays stopped at other tables, and in the main room the wheel was seen to pause. Yvonne held his breath. For a long moment, Chelmara stared at the book the floormaster held ready. Then one elegant hand moved, fingers closing around the offered pen. He signed his name with a flourish. The book was presented to the mouse, who took the pen and wrote briefly. The floormaster made the house's notation and stepped back, reverently closing the gilded covers. Lazily, almost lovingly, Chelmara replaced his 4 coins on the proper stack. Likewise, she produced a set of ship keys strung together on a short jeweled chain and lay it gently beside the mouse's quarter share in the center of the table. Ship against quarter share, he said, and inclined his head. Your deal, Lady Mouse.
I love that scene.
It never gets old. It never gets old, her calling him on his card play.
Mm-hmm.
And there we have working in part the background from Georgette Hare, who had presented to us colonials
Yes.
the attitudes of the hoi polloi, as the elder classes there in England, as they hadn't been, of course. This was one of the things that you need to realize, is that Georgette Hare is essentially science fiction.
Yes.
The place
the world building is beautiful.
The people she present may have represented to her readers as alien a viewpoint as many of the viewpoints that we see in other science fiction. As alien as perhaps as Jean Riai showed up in Ursula Le Guin's book. So I think that we sort of inherited and interpreted those kind of things together, and again, some of Lord Peter, into the societies that we brought here.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was lovely. Yeah, I one of the things that Christy and I have heard is people have, when they've encountered her stories, they often mentioned, oh, this is sort of in a way like the Liad stories. And one of the things which is a great compliment, and one of the things they focus on is, Christy, in your stories, there is an elaborate sense of honor, particularly among the ruling caste and the guard caste, who are the only ones who actually fight. To survive a fight you did not deserve to, or to fall into the hands of an opposing province, is pretty much, that's the point at which you say, I will now exit this life. And that does make things very complicated.
And they have conscious control over that.
Right. So we have Scott Coatsworth. Welcome. I think you might be muted, but if you would care to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I said hello to him when he came on, but I was muted. So
Yeah, and we did this training session yesterday, and he warned me about that. And of course, I'm still muted because I've only been doing this for 3 years. But hello, nice to see you.
hi. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm sorry I was bumping a little bit late here. It's been one of those, weeks. So congratulations on the release.
Thank you.
So tell us about yourself, Scott.
Okay. So I am basically a science fiction, fantasy, and magical realism author. Done a little bit of gay romance, but I tend to more kind of the diverse spec fic stuff. I do a lot of sci fantasy crossover. I have 2 trilogies out, and I am going to start releasing the 3rd trilogy in March. It's actually a 4-book trilogy, which is a whole nother long story in itself that I won't bore you with, but that's kind of the way my things go. They always want to be longer than they are. I thought I would just share the latest thing, which is Androids and Aliens. And this is my short story collection, my 3rd one. It's got 8 stories, a lot of dealing with climate change, and a lot of them that are hope punk, which is my other thing. I like to do stories that have kind of a hopeful aspect to the future, so that this future we're looking at right now of climate change and terrible politics and all the other things, maybe there's a way through it. Maybe things are actually going to get better at some point. So that's kind of my spiel. I was actually kind of thinking it would be good to talk a bit with you, Christy, about kind of how you approach writing your stuff versus me. And this is really about your day. It's not my day. And I had a couple of things I wanted to bring up with you, if you don't mind.
Well, you can ask.
Okay. So I was doing some research on you before I came in. I haven't actually read your stuff yet. I need to. I've got to put it on my list. The Tolari space and the world of Tolar. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yes, you are.
So you have 5 stories in that, and then 1 book of short stories so far. Is that correct?
Yes.
So
yes.
I've got kind of a similar thing going on where all my stories, my major novels, and some of the short stories are connected. So how do you kind of keep track of all that, so that when you're writing another trilogy or another short story or another whatever, how do you fit that all together so that you don't kind of make continuity mistakes? What's your process for that?
Well, so far it's all been sequential.
Okay.
I've got the 2 first contact short stories that come before the first novel.
Okay.
They were written after, but they come before.
Yeah.
And there's the first 3 novels are largely connected with the same characters in each. And then I started a new series, but it's a little bit later.
Okay.
The 4th book is a little bit later than the 3rd book. It's the first book of Exiles. I guess I keep track of it because I'm keeping it sequential like that.
Okay. Do you use like a story Bible or something, or?
I do have a Tolari Bible, but it's more for like personal details about characters. And I also have information like how far apart the major worlds in Earth's empire are.
Okay.
In terms of light years and how long it takes to get there at the speeds that I use, which, by the way, that was when I was setting up, how fast I have, faster than light travel. When I was setting that up, how long it would take to get from one world to another, I looked up what I thought was Star Trek Warp 6. I thought that was a reasonable speed for 500 years in the future.
Okay.
And I based all my times for how long it took Marianne to get from Earth to Tolar. It's all based on what I thought was Warp 6.
Uh-huh.
It's really more like Warp 9.9.
So they're faster.
It's baked in. There's really no way I can get around it now.
Well, probably nobody's going to take a ship out anytime soon and actually try to replicate that. So I think you're safe. Think about that. I mean, that's what tells me you are a science fiction writer, because you actually took time to think about how do all these things fit together and how do we get there and how long does it take and yeah, all that stuff you got to put together.
I actually had another science fiction writer who was an actual scientist ask me, if I'm not a scientist, how do I write science fiction? And my usual answer to that question is, I don't need to be an engineer to drive a car.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to know how an internal combustion engine works to be able to drive a car, or even just be a passenger in a car, which is what Marianne is when she's taking ship to Tolar.
Mm-hmm.
She's just a passenger. She doesn't have to know anything.
Right. It just goes zoom and then it gets there.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a term for that, hand wavium.
Yes.
Kind of, it just sort of happens. Just wave it away with your hand.
Faster than light travel is currently hand wavium. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. So how did we get to your world and your stories from kind of where we are today? What's like the path there? Was there like, in Star Trek, there was this kind of everything fell apart and then the Vulcans came and kind of helped out and things got better. How do we get from where we are to there? And is it, if I was in that time, would I recognize it, in terms of human society, or would it be very vastly different?
You would probably recognize it. It's something of a surveillance state.
Okay.
It's mildly dystopic, but people on the ground don't really notice it. Us ordinary schlobs just going about our day, we don't really notice it. It's more at the higher levels that you get into. There are surveillance fleas everywhere.
As a beta reader, let me step in for a minute. A lot of this comes in Farron's War, which is set on the human colony world of Far India. There has been an ecological disaster on Earth. In particular, at one point, because of some geotechnical engineering to try to solve climate control, the Deccan Plateau in India more or less erupts in volcanic fury.
It blew up.
And the government, the repressive government changes to try to, quote, survive that experience, set up a lot of cultural change. And in a way, it was regressive. You actually see, for example, some rather more prudish morality in some places because they're looking to the past and saying, well, it was better then, let's try to make it like it was in a particular time and place.
Earth is in a sort of post-colonial haze. When my stories start, it's, all of the really adventurous types have left. Earth's population has plummeted, and it's mostly out in the countryside. There's some high society nonsense going on in cities, but there's the oligarchy, but the ordinary people don't really notice that. And Marianne, the main character of the first book, is a school teacher. She teaches high school Spanish in Iowa, which is still a state, which Bertie mistakes for a country, but Bertie's from Britannia. Bertie is from a world that is circling Tau Ceti. So, he's not completely up on Earth geography.
Okay. I don't know that I buy this idea that people would pine for a more rosy past, because that never happens, right?
No, never.
There is government imposition. They may not be aware of the extent to which it's happened, and that's part of the ongoing plot of the story.
I've gotten dinged for the fact that Marianne does not fight being sent to Tolar, because she had her little life. She really liked it. She'd never thought about leaving Earth. She wanted to stay there, and Central Command says you go, and she went, and didn't fight it. But you see, she didn't have a choice. When Earth Central Command tells you to go, you go, or Earth Central Command makes your friends' lives hell.
You're really selling me on this. I got to read this now.
But I guess I wasn't explicit enough about that. When Marianne is sent, she didn't want to go, but she went. She had to. Yeah.
That's kind of stuff like you don't know if you should change it later on because it's already kind of, like you said, baked in, and like you really want to go with history.
It's canon. I mean, I could retcon it. I could go back and because I'm self-published, I can go back and I can edit the books and just quietly put them up there. But I don't think I should do that.
They're shaking their heads.
I own all the rights.
For everybody that complains about something, there was somebody that silently liked it, and then you could mess them up. So don't do that.
Oh, absolutely. You changed that paragraph. I love that.
That was my favorite paragraph in the whole book.
Yeah. Well, I wish people would tell me what their favorite paragraphs are. I don't get a whole lot of that kind of feedback.
Yeah. I'm working on my trilogy that's coming out, and it's actually it's in the same universe as my other ones, but it's this whole other world, and there's some connections between them. But my problem is that I destroyed Earth once, and then it came back. And then somehow between there and the last one that I wrote, Earth apparently got destroyed again, as far as the people on this world know, but I really haven't figured that out yet. So I don't know if it really did get destroyed, and I have to work that into the timeline, or if it didn't get destroyed and they're under the impression that it got destroyed. So it's like that kind of stuff when that's kind of was getting at earlier, when you're trying to keep track of multiple things, and you are smart because you're building it sequentially. I was like writing my first 2 trilogies, which were 1,500 years apart, at the same time. So book 1, book 1, book 2, book 2, book 3, book 3, and now I'm writing another one that's at the same time as the first trilogy, and I'm also writing one in the middle. But I've got another one, and it's like it does get really. There's a lot of details to keep straight and make sure that everything goes right. So I'm impressed that the way you're doing it is a lot smarter than what I'm doing.
I learned my lesson early because I wrote the 2 first contact stories after I wrote the Moran. The 2 first contact stories are actually the same 3 or 4 days,
okay,
from different points of view. And that was murder to write. It just, it was killing me with, I wanted it to, the timeline on one part of on one point of view to be compressed and not compressed on the other. And I'm like, oops, he hasn't done that yet. And I decided I'm not doing that again.
Yeah.
It's sequential from here on out.
Yeah. Very smart. Yeah, I like to make my life difficult. I don't know why. I noticed that. So I think the first book is it a male-female pairing in the first one?
Yeah.
Is it varies it all romance, or is there some that aren't romance? How do you kind of navigate that in the series?
The first 4 books are there's romances in all of them.
Okay.
Probably the most loosely defined romance as a romance novel is probably the second one, Daughters of Seraglio, where I actually have like 3 pairs of people having things go on. The third book is actually an established couple that gets torn apart. The third book is The Fall, and The Fall is actually 3 different kinds of fall is going on in the book. It's something of a pun, and the established couple in the book, Laura and the Piran, get torn apart because Laura has memory loss. Laura sustains a head injury and loses everything she remembers. And I did that because the amnesia trope is done badly so much.
Yes.
And it bothers me because I have personal family experience with my brother had a serious closed head injury and a lot of memory loss. And I've seen firsthand how it really affects people. You don't forget who you are. Losing self-identity is extremely rare. It's the last thing to go. He knew who I was. He knew who our parents were, but he just didn't remember a lot of things, and he became very impulsive. And that's what I did with Laura. She couldn't remember very much. Here's this man that she could feel his feelings, but she didn't know. Yeah, because she's become an empath, and they're bonded. Okay. So not only can she sense his feelings, not only is she a very powerful empath, even among empaths, but they're bonded. They're practically the same person as far as their emotions go. And she doesn't understand this at all.
She doesn't remember him. I love the fact that, not only does she not remember this man who obviously loves her, but everyone around her is pining for her to be the way she was before the accident.
Of course, yeah.
And so,
So
in a sense,
she's actually her own rival is herself.
I mean, it's the first wife and the second wife, except it's really one person.
It's the same person.
Yeah, I like that.
So,
And the other thing that, as a reader, as a male reader, that struck me differently also is that pregnancy actually takes up a certain amount of plot in a couple of the Talari space novels for various reasons. And it's interesting to see that in the context of a race where parenting is very different on Tolar.
I love how there's a ghost voice here, and we all just kind of accept this ghost voice.
that's Jeff. You haven't actually seen.
Hi, ghost voice, Jeff.
He zapped his window. There he is.
Ah, hey. Nice to finally meet you. You're muted, Jeff.
That's my better half.
He's muted.
He's over there. And there he goes.
So I have one more important question because my time is coming to an end here directly with you. Tell us what a parlor panther is.
I have two of them.
Yes, I was digging in your bio, apparently.
My little black kitties. I have two. They are both rescues. There is Myrtle, who was on the streets of Houston.
Ah, there we go.
There's one of them. That's Benici. He was on this. He was found at a gas station in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
That's where we adopted him, in Pittsburgh. And he was a little bag of bones. We think he was a little older than they thought at the time because he was so malnourished, because he gained 2 pounds the first 2 weeks that we had him.
Wow.
And he was still a slender cat, but he was about half grown. So he was a kitten. Myrtle, she was picked up in a sweep of stray animals in Houston ahead of Hurricane Harvey.
Oh.
Which is why we call her Miss Myrtle the Hurricane Cat. They picked up so many animals, they were sending them out all over Texas, and we were living in Austin at the time. And she ended up in a shelter in Austin.
Okay.
Where I walked into her enclosure. She jumped on my shoulder and rubbed my cheek with her face and purred in my ear, and that was it.
I do have to ask, is there a hazard having 2 black cats in the house where they're constantly actually running in front of you? Do you have to share bad luck, or is there something you have to do to kind of counteract that?
Well, the only bad luck about it is I don't have very good balance. So if they trip me, I'm done for. And I have vertigo and I have osteoporosis, and the combination is
not good.
Unfortunate. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, and I want to acknowledge that I think both Scott and Rebecca are involved with the new romance subforum or committee on the science fiction and fantasy writers association, correct?
Actually, I'm on the indie writers.
You're on the indie writers.
We work with each other with both committees. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah. There's so much going on behind the scenes among writers to give us stuff to read.
So these little secret things going on, right? You're more of it up there for me.
Writer world.
Yes. So before my little last bit finishes up, I wanted to say anybody who wants a free book, if you go to that website down there, I have a mail list sign up, and my first collection, Spells and Stardust, is free for all signups in ebook format. So grab a copy, and while you're doing that, make sure to check out on my website. I've got a post for Christie's book, and the cover is awesome. Who did the cover, by the way?
Tom.
Hello.
Oh, okay. Hey, it's beautiful. I love it. Thank you.
He did a cover for the fall and for Farron's War as well.
Very cool.
And hopefully, I'm trying to get covers for the new covers for the Moran and Daughters out of him.
Yeah.
And they are in work.
Thank you so much for joining us, Scott.
Thank you. Yes, I'll pick up the first one and read it when put in my TBR list. I'll let you know. Thank you.
Thanks.
Aren't you doing a review of Rembrandt Station?
I'm not personally. We are as the.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So personally, I'm not reading it, but I do want to read it at some point. But we have somebody that is reviewing it, so it should be coming up soon.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Well, great launch time, and enjoy the rest of the chat.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks, guys.
So next, according to the schedule, we have Carol. Thank you. Hello, Carol.
Hello.
You are up, and while you are doing that, I will be putting in chat a raffle for any of Carol's space opera ebooks of your choice.
Yeah. So if you've read some of them and want another one, or you want to let me know which one you want, and I'll give you recommendations for what you might like.
All right, you're up.
So I write the Central Galactic Concordance space opera, romance, adventure, mystery, action series. And I wrote, this is the first book I wrote, although it's not the first in, I'm terrible at holding this up in the front of the camera. I'm sorry. I wrote this is the first one I wrote, but it's not the first one in the timeline. That was an adventure, and I enjoyed my adventure. And so I wrote more of them. I have 4 novels out, and 5, I think, maybe 6 novellas. One of the novellas is kind of like in the big damn story arc that's going on. I'll talk about that in a minute. And then the others are part of, they're more side adventures, written primarily for the purposes of the Pets in Space anthology series. And somebody in the comments, and I forget who it is, I'm not seeing it, who wrote this, said that they love hearing about anthologies. And why, thank you. I believe I will tell you about my anthology. I edit the Pets in Space series. We are up to, the current one is 7. It's out right now. It is a limited edition anthology. So we published it in October, and it's gone by January. And it supports a charity, Hero Dogs, that provides trained service dogs for disabled veterans and first responders in the United States. And we love that charity, so we give them 10% of our first month's royalties and the pre-orders, but it's pretty much one and the same thing. And then we always ask for brand new original stories, and they're novellas, not short stories. So you get a pretty good value for your money there, and you help support the charity, and it's all wonderful. So I think I mentioned earlier, if you were here, that I also write a story for it as well as edit it. And today I'm going to read you just a little section of the story that is in that Pets in Space 7. And I'm working right now on lining up the authors for Pets in Space 8, which will be published in October of this year. Very exciting. So let me tell you a little bit about the Central Galactic Concordance series. It's there's rebellion going on. There are 500 member planets across the galaxy, and they have never found another sentient species that they consider we humans are alone and free to just expand away across the galaxy. And so we do. And we have 500 member planets and about 200 years of peace. Although that's not going to last very much longer, because otherwise I wouldn't call it a rebellion, would I? So the government is kind of more centralized than it was in previous years, and it's kind of an expansionist economy. So they're kind of dependent on always finding more resources to consume and expand. And there in the chat, you can see the link to where you can enter the drawing for any one of my ebooks, and you just tell me which one you want, and if you win, and I'll give you the book funnel link for it. So in the government, the largest government agency is something called the Citizen Protection Service. And they are primarily needed because in the last millennia or so, some humans have been developing what we would now call psychic powers. they call them minders. These are people with mental talents that are things like telekinesis and telepathy and empathy and some other specialty things that I invented because it was fun, and I did. So some people consider minders to be threats, and some people don't. And the Citizen Protection Service thinks that it is its job to use any means necessary to keep the galactic peace. But trouble is coming, and there's no stopping it. So the Pets in Space story that I'm going to read to you is kind of like that just a little section of it is kind of like I mentioned, one of those little side visit, like day excursion on the cruise kind of thing. And one of the things that you should know before I just plunge right into reading is that there's something also in the galaxy called the pet trade. And they are, genetic engineering is strictly forbidden among humans, and the government and people are pretty serious about enforcing that. But animals aren't necessarily so lucky. So if the pet trade can call it a fantasy animal or recreate an animal, say, from the Ice Age, or is something invented like that, they can get away with pretty much anything that they can get away with, and they do. So they created one of the earlier traditional pet trade animals was a griffin. And so think of a miniature Western griffin, which is the animal that had the lion's body and the head of an eagle and wings and stuff like that, but make it into a bird and make it about this big, and and 4 legs and very cute and things like this. Most griffins are meant to be cute adornments for the wealthy. The griffins that you'll read about or hear about in this story were kind of left to become feral, and they're a little less benign, we'll call it. So this is I should tell you also that this is the point of view of Lark Sutrio, and she has just crashed, not quite intentionally. Somebody shot her out of the sky when she discovered that somebody was raiding her farm. It was like a smash and grab raid, and they chased her, and they shot her down, and she is now thinking that she is being hunted by the person who has come to finish the job of making sure that she doesn't, follow up and try and hunt down the thieves. So she thinks she's being hunted, and she has pretty much the clothes on her back, a few weapons, plus 2 griffins. So here we are. This is a story, by the way, is called An Entanglement of Griffins. Hidden behind a small dam of forest debris caught in the triangle of a broken tree trunk, Lark took 3 slow breaths, in and out, imagining inhaling serenity and releasing distractions with each exhalation. Pine needles tried to poke her butt, and the smell of pine sap made her eyes water. Fresh air was good. Waiting tanked. She reconnected with Flecken, who was clinging to a high vertical rock face. His gray feathers perfectly camouflaged his position. Through his spectacular distance vision, she watched the stranger make steady progress toward her location. The man wore a nondescript jacket, pants, and boots, and carried nothing in his gloved hands. He was pretty enough, with an imposing nose and dark, close-cropped beard and mustache. Hard to say if he was experienced in the woods, since she didn't know what that looked like. She'd guess his age at early 40s, but all that meant was he could afford a decent body shop, He could actually be anywhere from 17 to 170. Her original instinct had been to kill the man immediately, but she firmly quashed the idea. Nova 9 thinking had kept her alive in a hellhole prison for nearly a year, but it wasn't appropriate for peaceful living on a settled planet. The civilized thing to do was to talk to him first. And if she didn't like the answers, Nova 9 thinking was still on the table. Watching through Flecken's eyes, she willed the stranger to keep moving up the narrow ravine. Just 3 more steps. On cue, Flecken launched from the rock like a rocket with a piercing hiss and a flurry of wings. Startled into looking up, the man stopped watching his feet. Lark leaned back fast and jerked the branch in her hands. The web of monocables snapped up and tight to wrap around the man's ankles, sending him crashing to his knees. He swore when another cable web caught his arm over his jacket. He swore louder when pulling the jacket black actually tightened the cables even more and cut through his sleeve. Lark switched her focus to seeing through Relia's eyes. The little griffin sat on a low pine branch, watching the man flail. It took concentration to juggle between the griffin's keen senses and her own comparatively dull ones. Taking a deep breath, Lark called out, "Hello." The man stilled. "Hello. Are you lost?" She tried for a neutral tone. "Depends." Through Relia's eyes, she saw him touch the cable and around his trapped wrist. "Are you Galileo Sutro? Because if you are, I'm here for you." Cold flooded Lark's chest. They knew her legal name. She and her sanctuary had been specifically targeted. "Who are you?" "Baron's own Okanson." His fingers delicately traced the cable trapping his other arm. "My friends call me Pim. Friends like Yulka and Zaid." She wanted to believe him, but a well-trained telepath could undetectably invade her mind to pull those names. The Volksam Dutch accent was a clever touch if it was real. On the other hand, why would rural raiders hire an expensive high-level telepath to track down a lone woman in the middle of nowhere? Too late, she realized she'd shared her emotional turmoil with her griffins. Flecken hissed his anger as he dipped a wing to catch a fast air current. He knew how to deal with enemies. Lark scrambled to her feet. "Duck and cover your head." She focused on Flecken's mind. He was determined to protect her and Rilia. Sending soothing shots, she shared an image with him. Just a warning. Flecken moved so fast she couldn't tell if she got the message until the acidic contents of his stomach landed 2 meters away from where Okanson huddled. The ground sizzled as a noxious cloud rose and drifted southward to the wind before dissipating. Thank the universe the man had listened and made himself a small target. Flecken slowed his flight. In his mind, she sensed lingering doubt and anger. Her fault for confusing him. She sent him a quick wave of pride and gratitude. His tension eased as he turned to ride an updraft. In the deadly environment of Nova 9, the feral griffins had survived in part because they defended their flock mates. She wouldn't change that behavior even if she could. Lark eased herself around the debris and circled to a primary pivot point for her trap. Okanson still huddled. "It's safe now." He unwrapped his free arm from around his knees and pulled back his hood. A low whistle sounded when he saw the chemical burn spot. "Yulka told me how the rock griffins saved all the prisoners in Nova 9, but I have never seen it in action." That more than anything convinced her he was telling the truth. Not even a top telepath could have pieced that together out of the memories so quickly. And Zaid and Yulka had promised to send someone to help her since they couldn't come yet themselves. They wouldn't have sent anyone they didn't trust. What a fantastic first impression she'd made. Smart Money said he was planning an emergency exit as soon as he got away from the brain-warped woman. Remorse was an iridium weight on her stomach. I owe you an apology. No harm done. He tugged his still trapped wrist and gave her a hopeful look. Would you happen to have a knife? I didn't think I'd need one. Yes. She was glad her brown skin disguised her embarrassed flush as she turned to open her hidden backpack. With wire cutters in hand, she sliced through the snare's 3 key nodes. You can step away now. After the mono cable dropped to the ground, she began collecting the pieces and looping them over her arm. How did you find me? Your house comp. I pinged you from the spaceport and left a message that I was on my way. Your perimeter didn't respond, so I thought you'd left it open for me. He kicked his feet free of the cables. Do you need a medic? There's blood on your face. No, I'm Ace. Her congested sinuses put lie to her breezy words by sending a rivulet of blood down her lip. She blotted it with the back of her sleeve. Well, I will be. He ducked his head. I'm sorry to have to tell you, but your sanctuary compound is a shambles. The main house and the tall storage building were sliced and hauled in a hurry. She made herself ask the question she'd been burying in the dark corner of her mind. Did you see any griffins? Not see exactly. He brushed gloved fingertips by his temple. I can sense life signs, sort of like active sensors in space. I felt 7 birds in a clump and 6 other animals spread out, but I can't make them feel my good intentions. They're probably terrified. Her chest ached with dread. Did you see any casualties? No, sorry, I should have said. Nothing dead except a charred spot in your garden. The thieves were after valuables, not violence. They were just sloppy. Your house comp was panicking and begged me to rescue you because your flitter's accident emergency beacon was activated. I asked it to run a self-check to give it something to do besides fretting. She snorted in amusement and instantly regretted it as blood sprayed out in a splatter of blood from her nose. Yulka says your people don't have laws against self-aware AIs, but here in the CGC, house comps don't panic or fret. They follow complex ordered protocol arrays. One shoulder shrugged. It gave me the coordinates, but your flitter was empty. I felt a human moving away and assumed it was you. I circled and found a place to land so I can intercept you. He shook his head. I didn't think how it would look from your point of view. No harm done, she said. And that is my excerpt from my story.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if there's any questions, I'll answer them. Otherwise, I think there's other people who are
Okay.
up next.
And I have just put the winners for your 2 audiobooks in chat.
Excellent. Annette and Lorette.
Loretta.
Oh, Loretta. Okay.
And now it's time for Rebecca R.K. Thorne.
Hello.
Welcome back, and you have the floor, my lady.
Okay. All right. Well, I was going to talk first about just a little bit about this series. This is my Audacity series. I got another one of them back here. This is my favorite cover. But I was just going to talk a little bit about some of the ideas that sort of led me to write this series first. And then I have a very short snippet to read. But yeah, so I think there was a couple of ideas that were kind of percolating in my mind before I started writing this, and it was when they actually kind of came together that I got started on an actual series. So one of them was pretty basic. You know, there's a lot of sci-fi out there with, you know, a ship that's being followed, and most of the people on the ship are male. And so I thought, well, what would an all-female ship look like, or what would that be like to be on and write about? Of course, I didn't make it all female in the end. It was sort of mostly female because otherwise hard to make a romance out of it. But that was one of those first ideas. And then another idea that I was sort of percolating on was, you know, I think we see a lot of evil billionaires and oligarchies and stuff like that. But could what if we had like a billionaire philanthropist that was actually being helpful? What could that be like? I think today I kind of feel like that idea is a little bit naive, but that was one of the founding ideas of this series. And another one that sort of I got really into was the way that hormones and our nervous system shape our thoughts, and could we use things like genetics and cybernetics to kind of influence people's thoughts at a level that doesn't feel like they're being influenced. And there's also a lot in the world that sort of is based on, if you're familiar with the concept of CRISPR, this is kind of like a gene editing technology that we have now where we can use enzymes to edit genes. And this can be really great for diseases and stuff like that. But it also is kind of a little bit scary because we could edit just about any gene. And if you could combine that with, a more viral technology, could genes be edited that, maybe someone didn't want to have edited? Could that be turned into a bioweapon? So this is a world where that kind of gene editing technology is widely available, and there are lots of bad actors abusing it. And we have some people that are sort of trying to help that situation in a sort of far future multi-planet um, space kind of thing, where they're kind of going around trying to find some of these people that are abusing um, science and trying to sort of improve the situation, because it's something that's hard for the governments at the time to police, especially since a lot of the planets don't have much of a government. Um, and yeah, overall, those are some of the cool concepts that I was sort of floating around in there. And when I got sort of more into thinking about the cybernetic part of it, and how thoughts could be influenced, looking at things like norepinephrine, adrenaline, and stuff like that, testosterone. I got into this idea, but maybe I was on Pinterest looking at Warhammer a little too much. But one of the cool like archetypes in sci-fi that I wanted to work with was, sort of that space barbarian kind of archetype, and trying to figure out like, well, what would that really be like? Would that be like a, just a cultural thing, or could there be some scientific backing that makes them like that? So I thought, well, what if we could combine these two ideas and like have these people that have been cybernetically altered to kind of be barbarians? And that is sort of how I gave birth to the idea of Thoroki, which are these mercenaries that kind of are up for hire, but they're sort of only focused on violence and rage and not really much else, making money. And part of that is because, whether they really understand it or not, their nervous system has been edited to make them that way. And one of the things that the people that edited them to be like this did was they also sort of made them forget about sex and the opposite sex and that kind of thing. And so we start with our hero in the story is someone who wants out. He doesn't want to be part of this group anymore. And so he's kind of broken that system. He's gotten help and gotten someone to kind of break that programming. But he doesn't necessarily understand what 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 that means to break it. And so he gets it kind of reverted, and he's getting some control back of himself, getting him back to more of a free being, and he's trying to sort of escape. And I thought, well, what would be the worst place to put that person? And that would be probably on a ship full of women. So meanwhile, he has sort of a package that he's got, which is this Empress capsule that he's got supposed to get somewhere. So, but he's got to keep that a secret. So that's part of sort of the ideas behind this. Another thing I struggled with when I was writing this series was the ideas sort of between utopian and dystopian kind of stuff. So, like, did I want to picture something that was like a very ideal, like what this is what we should be like, or did I want to, point at a mistake? And I think that that's a hard thing for me, because I think that I do like happy endings and optimistic endings and stuff like that. So it's, it's easy to have a dystopian story where you kind of topple it at the end. But it can also be hard and kind of depressing. And I felt like I was in enough of a dystopia at the time too. So would it be better to write something that was more of an ideal? But in the end, I sort of settled for fairly dystopian story, but people that just don't care. They're going to try to do the right thing regardless of it. And looking at some of the influences of this book and this series, one of the ones actually was the Mass Effect game series from BioWare. I was going to say Bioshock, BioWare, and the fun thing about that, I think, is that Shepard, the main character in that series, has such determination and perseverance. That was sort of a character trait I kind of wanted to bring through. So our heroine and a lot of the characters tend to show that kind of thing, and it's kind of an idea that moves through that kind of stuff. So drives the series is sort of perseverance in the face of dystopia and struggle. So I have a very short part to read. This is just from the beginning of the book. Our heroine's team has kind of raided a illegal scientific operation and kind of knocked everybody out, taken everything they wanted, and left. And we are seeing our hero kind of wake up in the aftermath. Cale gasped for breath and sat straight up, smacking his helmet into the steel laboratory table before collapsing again. He groaned. His lungs might have briefly stopped with the way he found him aching to breathe. Growling, he grabbed the edge of the wheeled steel table and sent it careening through the air into the far wall. It crashed satisfyingly into the cell force fields with dull blue buzzes of irritation. There, that made him feel slightly better. He wasn't going to live to be 50 at this rate. Hell, he'd probably be lucky if he made the 2 more years till 30. Another reason he needed out. He wasn't dying a Thoroki, contract be damned. Not if he could help it. He'd had no choice about joining up with these thieves and murderers, just as he'd had no choice about joining the Grey Dragons of his youth. Just once he wanted a choice to be something other than a criminal. He lurched upright, groaning again, fragging knockout grenades. If their armor weren't so damn old and crusty, they wouldn't be in this position. Was that so much to ask? But no, his full comrades preferred rust and snarled edges and looking tough. Sure, the savagery made some people shit their pants when Thoroki showed up, but it couldn't have had much effect if your enemy took you out before you even walked in the room. They might as well have pounded their chests like gorillas. Now they were all in their asses, and whoever had just assaulted the lab was probably long gone and laughing the whole way. Or they could still be here. As reality rushed back in, he grabbed for his laser rifle and froze. Gone. Shit. Listening, only silence met his ears. Maybe some dust settling somewhere from the earlier attacks. He stood slowly, still struggling to regain his breath. Sweat dripped down his forehead. A fragging armor cooling unit must have broken in the grenade blast too. Great. Damn this infernal rock. Damn this whole mission. Damn all the Thoroki while he was at it, and the enhancers too. He scanned the scene. The 6 who'd been in charge of the evac were all laid out. Dead or just unconscious? Odd timing. How had anyone known that this bunker was even here? The only newcomers for the last half year had been those 6. One of those damn Drex must have led them here, or sold the information to the highest bidder. He hoped they were dead if they were fragging traitors. Who else could have given away their location? Cale stilled as he spotted their primary concern. Enhancer High Command Lord Regent Jun-Il Lee was just as much unconscious. He lay on the lab floor, hands splayed, eyes closed. Unconscious or dead? That's it for me.
Yay! Jeff, you're muted. I can hear you talking, but like over there.
Is that any better?
That's better. Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you. So I will announce the winners of the audiobook in a minute. But first, we'll have a brief promotion. Chris, if you could bring up the cover for Rembrandt Station. Talk about that for a minute. Though these covers are both by Tom Peters. The one on the left is the third book in the Talari Space series, The Fall, that we talked about earlier. And on the right is Rembrandt Station, which is just released this week. Christy, can you tell us a little bit about Rembrandt Station and how it came to be?
How it came to be is fairly easy. I had been struggling with writer's block as regards the Talari Space Universe until spring of 2021, when we discovered a very large lump in my belly, and we didn't know what it was. And there was a lot of, whispering. There was about a 50% chance that it was cancer at the time. And something sort of turbocharged in the back of my brain. At the same time, Bertie, who I had promised to give a story to, started invading my dreams. Pretty much, he wanted his guy. He wanted his story told. He wasn't going to wait any longer. And while I was like in the middle of constant testing and biopsying and all of that happy stuff, I wrote the first draft of Rembrandt Station in, I believe it was 26 days. I was so driven, and it was Bertie driving me. I did make him pay for that. He had to work, and he had to work hard for his happily ever after. But that's how the story came to be. What was the second part of your question?
Well, a year. I mean, a year of editing after that. But
there was a year of editing after that. Yes.
It's a romance. And Bertie finally gets his love that probably you go looking back at the stories he's been faunching for at least 2 books.
Oh yeah, I knew he was going to fall in love with Ferric as soon as he bounced onto the page. I mean, I knew that, but he was introduced in the fall, and was it the fall? Yeah, it was the fall. There was so much going on in that novel that I couldn't deal with another love affair, so they just stayed friends. And Bertie, I decided that Bertie was like, completely oblivious to the fact that Ferric was in love with him as much as he was in love with Ferric.
That's the thing about empaths. Empaths know, although they might not know how to interpret it.
Well, empaths have very clear boundaries. They might know how you feel about them, but if you are not open to approach, they do not. So.
Okay. So this novel is available this week. I hope you all try it out. In addition, if you pick up Rembrandt Station through this weekend, go out to Christy's website at christymyers.com, and you'll see that we have a giveaway for her previous 4 Talari novels, downloaded for free if you pick up Rembrandt Station through the end of the weekend. So beyond that...
Oh, a cat! There's Trooper. Trooper doesn't want to be on camera. Oh, kitty, big kitty.
Yeah.
Such a big kitty.
So, Christy, you're up. What would you like to read, or what would you like to talk about?
Yeah, what I had planned, I have a series of short readings here. I thought I would start with a short reading from Rembrandt Station, hopefully highlighting a new character who is the deputy station master on Tolar Trade Station as the story opens. At this point in the story, Birdie is recovering from his mishap, and he is back up at the station, although he is still quite ill. Okay. Satina cleared her throat, alerting him that they had been speaking English. "Forgive me, I'm very tired," Birdie said in Monrali, and summed up the conversation for Satina. "I promise to rest afterward, and then you can go off to explore the station. The observation decks are at the top of the north spire and the bottom of the south, if you would like to see the view. The public lifts access both." A gleam of excitement lit her eyes, giving her the look of a young child under a holiday tree. "I would like that very much." "Right then, off we go." C&C was up several levels, in the most central, most heavily shielded part of the spire. Birdie handed Satina and Jedin off to the staff and headed for Afrin's office. Before he reached it, she came bursting out and stopped a pace in front of him. "Birdie!" she cried. Then her eyes widened. "Merciful Allah, look at you. You look much worse in person. And you haven't even dressed in your silly antique earth clothing. If you're sick enough to leave off your foppish ways, I am not foppish. I am fashionable." She gave him a long, steady look, then enunciated crisply, "Foppish. But you should be in bed, with your caliph feeding you grapes. Why are you here? You begged for my help." "That was some other Afrin, my evil twin, the stupid one. You're sick, Birdie. Go to bed." "I plan on it as soon as I get my keepers settled with security." "You have keepers?" Her gaze roamed the room until it landed on Jedin and Satina, getting their hands scanned. "This is an apothecary and a servant, yes?" "An apothecary aide and a servant. The Monral's head apothecary wouldn't let me leave without them. Finally, someone who figured out you need adult supervision." Birdie snorted. "Very funny." That didn't take as long as I thought it might. The next snippet comes from the sequel novelette. And I'm not going to scream. The first word, you'll just have to imagine Birdie screaming the word.
This
I
is
will point out.
This is the sequel to Rembrandt Station.
Yeah, this is a sequel to Rembrandt Station. It's going to be a novelette that ties up some loose ends that I introduced in the epilogue of Rembrandt Station. I will comment that the word vukali I invented based on an ancient Nordic word for overbearing. It means alien or enemy. All right. "Vukali!" Birdie screamed the word over the roar of wind and surf. He spun toward the east, heart pounding, away from the blowing, breaching Havalra passing through the deep channel just to the north, and toward the lethal intent he sensed in the water. The guards who had come with the picnic party converged from all over the little island. They formed a wall of lavender robes between the threat approaching from the east and their ruler and the little girl clinging to him and Birdie. Down the beach, 4 transport pods burst from the ocean and slid onto the sand. Before they fully halted, enemy raiders in a pale shade of coral pink spilled out and grouped together to begin their approach. One more robed figure followed, taking his time, reeking of satisfaction that Birdie could read in his body language even at a distance. This man's robe sported the bright white embroidery that identified him as their ruler, the Nalev, Monrelar's mortal enemy. The non-combatants at the picnic party broke and ran for the other side of the island, and anger turned the Monral's dark, homely face even darker. He lifted his wide-eyed, whimpering daughter onto a hip. "How did this happen?" he demanded. "How did they surprise us?" Before Birdie could reply, a man, a nurse, ran up to the Monral. Get her away from here, the Mineral ordered as he placed his daughter into the yellow-clad man's arms. She struggled in vain to get free, to get back to her father. Get all the children to the stronghold. Go, now. Fafi, the little girl cried. Go! Child held fast in his arms, the nurse ran to rejoin the rest of the party as the head guard, Arav, led his guards forward toward the advancing Bukali. Bertie remained at the Mineral's side. They traveled with the Havalra, he said. I couldn't distinguish them until they left the cover of the channel. The Mineral growled, and Bertie no longer had the luxury to look anywhere else as the two parties of guards began to fly at each other, trying for a scratch with the drug needles at their fingertips. The Nalev waded through the fray, making straight for the Mineral at the same leisurely pace he used as he left the transport pod, dodging finger swipes and striking lavender-clad Minerali guards out of the way with casual efficiency. Arav attacked the enemy ruler as he broke through the line of defenders, and he was too fast for the Nalev to land a blow. He spun and vaulted, dodged and rolled, swiping with his needles whenever possible. The Nalev avoided Arav's every slash, but his progress toward the Mineral stalled, freeing the young ruler to join his outnumbered guards in fighting the Bukali. At his council's insistence, the Mineral had brought 20 with him, and he had declared that too many for a picnic to watch the Havalra migration. But if Bertie counted correctly, it was a mere half of what they faced, a full raid of Nalevi and Bukali, 40 enemy guards. The Mineral strode toward the combat, beckoning Bertie to follow. Bertie tried to keep some awareness on the cluster of transport pods at the other end of the island, but he dared not turn or take his eyes off the fighting, and used only his empathic senses to track the non-combatants. As he approached the Malay, the pods raced away, taking every presence on the other end of the island with them. Bertie turned his full attention back to the combat. All right. I'm trying to figure. That was a taste of what's coming. And an even shorter little snippet of the next novel about Kim. Kim's name is Kimberly Storm Gale. He is of the opinion that he is living proof that some people should not be allowed to marry each other, much less name their own children. Kim knew better. He told himself that firmly as a wave of punishing hammers pounded in his head. He knew better than to drink Kekrak's wine. So the fact that he had done so was probably down to 2-5 and 4-3, releasing pheromones that interfered with his good judgment. And that, oh damn, that had started with lifting his mood while they were still in the mud pool, hadn't it? Manipulative little lizards. They were only trying to help, he was sure. But now he couldn't remember much of the evening at all. Kekrak's wine. Jesus, there was a reason it was banned in human space. He might as well have been drinking absinthe, except that he didn't feel drunk at the time. Not a good accompaniment to an evening conversing with an adult brood male in his prime. Damn, what a waste. Kim flung an arm over his face, blocking out the tormenting light on the other side of his eyelids, and realized that warm, pleasant weights pressed him down, weights which wriggled in response to his movement. He lifted his throbbing head to peer one-eyed out from under his elbow and met the drowsy blink of a broodling curled up on his chest. At first, he thought, though at this age it was hard to tell. It had 2 tails, though, so it definitely wasn't the baby brood male. Those only had 1. Kim was fully awake now, unfortunately. He lowered his arm. He was flat on his back in a shallow bed of warm mud, head propped on a sandbag, with 2-5's current mob of broodlings curled on top and around him, most of them asleep. Well, that made sense. Thanks to the wine, he couldn't remember how the evening ended. The adults must have herded him into the nursery to let him sleep it off. Maybe he'd get another chance to interview the brood male. He'd beg if he had to. He got his elbows underneath him, which provoked another round of sleepy wriggling and a series of dull plops as the broodlings on his chest slid off. He looked around, but still didn't see the young brood male. He started counting. Hold on. Those weren't mud brick walls. This wasn't 25's mud brick house in Kekrak's Maine's capital city. Kim sat up. This was a spaceship. And now that he thought about it, the soft hum of a case space drive sent a slight vibration through his sit bones. Good Lord, they were in space. 25 and 43 had kidnapped him. Aliens. God, you just never really knew what they would do next. And that is the readings that I had set for.
Thank you very much.
Can we have the rest of the crew back?
Yes, please.
So I can see everybody there. Okay.
Round table time. And Gail Martin has joined us. Welcome, Gail.
Hi.
Would you care to introduce yourself, Gail?
Sure. And congratulations, Christy, on the new release. I'm
Thank you.
Gail C. Martin and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy, steampunk, near future apocalyptic, and a bunch of other stuff. As Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. So I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me.
You're welcome. Jeff?
We've had a bunch of people through here, and I can bring myself back here too. No, we've got 6 of you. That's fine. We've been listening to each other. Anybody have comments to make?
Damn, we ought to be writers.
I love listening to authors read.
Christy, I'm sorry to tell you that as soon as you started reading, Trooper climbed up in my lap and was right here and sat here for almost all the time, sat here and then said, "Oh, well, she's not looking," and got down. So we didn't get to show Trooper for you.
I am sorry that I missed that.
But he was rapt. He wanted to hear.
Oh, well, I have a cat seal of approval.
Best thing you can possibly have.
We have a question?
Yes, we do.
So the answer, An Iron Butterfly, is that I was reading from An Entanglement of Griffins, which is the novella that currently appears in Pets in Space 7, which you can get out on your favorite bookseller. And I will eventually release that story in an expanded version, but probably not for another 6 months or so. So if you want that story right now, you just can't wait. Pets in Space 7.
Thank you.
When is Birdie's sequel coming up? Well, I'm still struggling with a few plot beats in it. It's about, I believe it's 17 or 18,000 words, so it's like novelette length, not quite a novella. I will get that out as soon as I'm happy with the story.
Okay.
There are some complications coming up in the Talari universe with respect to sensitives. There are, for those who haven't read the novels, all Talari are empaths, but some are exquisitely sensitive empaths, sort of an order of magnitude more sensitive than the rest. They are cherished. They are very rare. And
they don't always have an easy time of it, as I recall.
No, well, yeah. I mean, one of them had a pretty bad time of it in Farron's War.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I wanted to to show the back cover of
Yes.
because I'm very proud of this. Let me see if I can actually get it on
It's
the
hard to do.
screen.
Okay.
So
Love it.
this is I really tried to loosen up because it's kind of a sensitive's image of the storm. So I loosened my technique considerably. I love it, and I'm never going back.
I will say, if you go out and look at the Amazon preview of the paperback version
Mm-hmm.
of Rembrandt Station, you can actually see the back cover art that Tom is talking about in full detail. And
Yeah,
I put up his I'm putting up his DeviantArt page in the chat if anyone would like to see Tom's other space art.
Yeah, which is
that is actually an image that is directly taken out of a scene in the book. Something that a very, very powerful empath sees in a place that the rest of us see as basic dark, so black that it could suck out your very soul. But that's what she sees.
I love doing that piece. That just thrilled me to get it. I think I got it right.
Oh yeah, it's beautiful. I love it.
Okay, we got a couple of questions here. One of them is for Gail. What are you working on these days?
Well, thanks for asking. Spellbound just came out December 29th, and it's the fourth book in the Joe Mack adventures from Falstaff Books. So that we're still kind of in the throes of that being new. But the next one up, I am overdue to finish Reckoning, which is the third book in the Darkhurst series. It was just a very difficult book to try to write, given the events of the last couple of years. A little more on the nose than I thought it was going to be when I dreamed up that series in 2014. So I'm about 100 pages shy there. That's the next big thing to get out of the gate. But I'm excited about finally getting that wrapped up. And anybody who's been waiting for it will be glad that I get it wrapped up too. I'm sorry about that.
Thank you. And a question from Stephanie Burke. Christy, are you going to delve into other genres like cozy mysteries or steampunk romance?
Cozy mysteries might intrigue me. I'm not sure about steampunk. I do have something of an aversion to appending the word punk to the end of everything. I mean, it seems to be proliferating like bunnies. There's a punk for everything now. Cozy mystery might be intriguing, but it might be something that I have actually a couple of characters on Tolar that might actually work for. Now you've got me thinking.
That was the plan.
I'm sure. I really love it when people ask me questions about Tulare culture, because if it's something I haven't thought about, it helps me, further flesh out the
Yeah, it's so
Tulare
helpful.
space universe.
Tom, when are you doing more fiery images? You're on mute, my friend.
Yep. Okay. So, long story. I've been connected doing stuff for the role-playing game Traveler for about 1 million years. and at one point during the period when we were really producing a lot of new ships for the game, I and my friend Rob Caswell invented the Fiery class close escort ship, which is just it's a fast, well-armed, cool ship that a lot of people immediately fell in love with. And I didn't realize how much people had gone nuts over it. It kind of appeared in a magazine issue that was, almost the last issue of the magazine's run, and it got some good feedback, but I didn't know. None of us knew. About 20 years later, it became obvious to me that there was actually a sub fandom for the Fiery. So
This sounds like a version of what happened to Sharon and Steve with the early Liad stories.
yeah. So I'm actually going to be doing some more Fiery illustrations in the near future. It's a lovely ship, and I love illustrating it. So
Hello, everybody. This is Chris Weave. I had told, I'm the technical guy behind the scenes. I had said that nobody will see me or hear from me unless there's a problem. There is not a problem, but I just have to say thank you for more Fiery images. I've been waiting for you. I asked you about it at Confluence, and you told me you were going to do this.
yeah,
So I'm the head of the Fiery fan club.
yeah. I didn't know the fan club was here.
Yeah, I mean, I declare myself to be the president of at least the Midwest chapter of it. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you very much.
Sure.
And a question for all the authors: is there a genre that you will not touch, or are there things that newer authors in the fandom are doing that feel problematic? Let's start with Rebecca.
Oh, horror. I don't write horror. I like to be happy. Of course, then after I said that, there started to be some horror elements in later books in the sci-fi series, but really they're just, horrific scenes, or not even probably for someone that likes horror. But for me, they were a little scary. When you write a scene and you're like, I'm not sure how I felt about writing that and what I think of myself now. But yeah, mostly I think things like I am interested in practically every genre. I'm like, Glass Onion has me wanting to write a murder mystery, but like I feel like I'm just not really into sort of that. I think horrors that kind of go for like the justified ending, like a very like, righting a wrong might work, but yeah, mostly I'm not into gore and slashing stuff.
Errol.
So I couldn't write a contemporary romance if my life depended on it.
It's hard.
I admire the people who can. That is a skill set that is just beyond my ability. Pretty soon there would be like a vampire around the corner, or aliens popping down to kidnap someone or whatever. I would just never be able to do it. My only problem in fandom doesn't. So I love fanfic and all that stuff. I wrote it as a kid. Me and my friends wrote it. I read some of the stuff later, and I went, wow, I'm glad no one published this, because boy, did that suck. But it did teach me, to put words after another, and story concepts and things like that. So I love fan fiction. What I never like and will never countenance is like the non-consent and the dubious consent and the stuff like that. I just and it's just me personally. There's people who love it, and that's fine. That whatever. It's just I cannot. I'm too squeamish for that. I just can't do it.
Okay, Steve.
So somebody on screen already knows one of my I won't do's, and that would be Christy when I told her I don't do zombies.
Oh yeah.
Nice.
And that was an unfortunate event. I was trying to put together a.
Yeah, there was another story I should have sent you instead.
But there was she sent me a zombie story, and it's no, I don't do zombies. Zombies are right out. And I feel like, and I'm going to say this, and you can quote me if you want, but please don't spread it too wide. I think there are people whose careers have been trashed by the fact that they got caught into to writing zombies for far too long, and they forgot how to do other characters. And so I won't do zombies. We're reading, when I say we, because Sharon and I happen to share a lot of the ebooks that we buy these days. We're reading extremely widely, and in areas that I probably wouldn't have considered 15 years ago. But we've read so much already. You know, I started reading when I was my first science fiction book was A Visit to the Mushroom Planet, which came out about 1956 or so. And so I've been reading science fiction for almost 60 years, or is that 70 now? And so I've read a whole lot, and I don't get to read a lot of the newer authors, in part because I still have this, in effect, a tremendous to be read file that goes back 40 years or so.
Mhm.
So I don't read a lot of the new authors. I can't tell you what they're doing from that way. We do get some books sent to us from time to time that I read, but I'm in a spot where the people who are sending us books to look at are generally already well-crafted people. So I can't tell you what they're doing wrong. What I'm reading works.
Mhm. Gail, what about you?
Well, as far as a genre that I won't touch, I think it's unlikely that I would set out to write an extremely hard science fiction, just because that's not my bailiwick. That's not what I went to school for. But I never say never, because I've got a son who's an aerospace engineer, so I kind of grew my own expert resource. You know, it could happen, but I wouldn't hold my breath for it. In terms of what newer authors are doing that feels problematic, I think that too many people are giving too much credibility to things that they are seeing on Bookstagram or Book Talk, and they're thinking that it creates a lot of FOMO, a lot of fear of missing out, a lot of everybody else is doing so much better than I am, a lot of everybody else is making $1 million writing books, you know, and it's not true. But if
That's just John Scalzi.
yeah, just John. But if that's where they're getting their information, then it's needlessly depressing them and maybe making them giving up on writing. But it's not true. It's an echo chamber. And so much as I love social media, I'm on TikTok, I do that, you know, I'm out there. But you got to learn who to listen to and who to just dismiss. And a lot of the people talking out there are just blowhards. So that would be the problematic piece. Is just don't listen to that crap.
Sorry.
Is Sharon still there, Steve?
Sharon had to deal
I
with.
had a cat emergency.
You did.
I did.
So what about you? Is there a genre you will not touch?
Well, you know, I hate to do that. It's like do not name the well from which you will not drink, because immediately somebody's going to come in with a beer. You know, I don't tend toward horror, and I tend to write more hopeful things, but that doesn't mean that everything is hopeful. We've written some downers. I can't say anything that I absolutely won't touch.
Okay. Christy?
You
You used to say horror.
Well, I was gonna say horror because I do have one horror story, and writing it, I scared myself, so I probably won't write another one because I touched something in myself I don't want to acknowledge. But other than that, I would agree with I won't do dubious consent or non-consent. I just won't do that. As far as problematic, I guess what bugs me is following the herd, but you know, I've got my own universe and I'm playing in my own sandbox, and it just doesn't really it doesn't do anything for me to write in somebody else's universe, so I don't. I don't know, maybe the FOMO, the fear of missing out, just doesn't really click with me. as far as that goes. I've got my own books and my own characters, and I'm totally in love with my characters, especially Birdie right now.
Which is a good place to be.
Can I add something to what Gail said too?
Please.
Just in terms of the problematic thing, yeah, I think in terms of burnout, I feel like there's a lot of people sort of rushing toward burnout right now, and sort of especially newer authors. And I'm fairly slow writer, and that's partially because I just really don't want to burn out. I came from a graphic design background and other arts, and kind of understanding that, you know, you have to pace yourself. And one of my first lessons in graphic design was I had this Japanese professor who couldn't really speak that much English. And he would periodically just make you leave the studio and walk around the building because he would just be like, you will see it differently when you come back. And it was true, right? It actually looked different. Like, it was, you know, the brain does these things with illusions. And so, yeah, I think there's, you know, while there's so much amazing potential right now, it's a great time to be a writer. It's also a really great time to burn yourself out. And so we see these people that are achieving these heights, but we don't really know whether they have carpal tunnel, what they're sacrificing, kind of, you know, to make that happen. So pacing ourselves is good.
It's finiti.
I have a Myrtle.
A Myrtle.
I have achieved Myrtle.
Hi, Myrtle.
Baby. She doesn't want to stay up here. Okay, take the focus back off me. Honey, thank you.
We'll get there. There we go. Well, we've had some great questions from the audience, and it's been really fun with you. Do you have any questions for each other while we're here? Any last words?
Who's going to be at BossCon?
I will.
Okay.
I'm going to be at BossCon.
So we're planning on being at BossCon. We have our room reservations
And our train reservation.
and our train reservations. So we're planning on being at BossCon. I would like to mention in passing that I'm glad to see Tom Peters is still plying his trade here. Tom did covers for me many years ago. I hate to think how much, 20 years ago maybe,
Yeah,
and more. And I'm glad to see he's still out and about and doing, because so many of the old guard seem to fade away over time. But I'm glad to see that he's still working. It's good to see you.
Tom is old guard. Tom, Jeff and Tom were college roommates.
Yep.
That's right.
Back a ways.
Back away. We've known each other for a
Short,
long
a
time.
few years after I met Steve and Sharon. So
Speaking of, since I ran off at one point when somebody else was on the focus to grab my prism. Since I felt like I had permission to show it because Steve showed his.
Okay.
That's
You have to be careful where you put it. Don't put it in the sun.
right. Yeah, and that's what you told me the night that I won it.
So
we know several people who also
we had a scorched mark on the living room wall for a little while in the old house because we put it in the sun. It's so beautiful.
it was very pretty, but the wall went. No, this could get serious in midsummer if it was lasted too long. So
okay.
Got a bit warm, huh?
Mm-hmm.
We're coming to the end of our time. I thank you all for being here, coming to celebrate with us.
Congratulations.
Congratulations,
Congratulations, Christy.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming.
And thank you in the audience. And we look forward to seeing you at another one of these for another launch sometime in the future. Thank you all.
Don't forget to tell everybody you know to buy my book.
Okay, so